Nuclear energy is the most dangerous kind of energy that's ever been invented. It has killed an unbelievable number of people. And as a result, we have to stop it immediately.
How many?
How many? How many has it killed? Well, I'll check. 1 second. Okay, Chernobyl has killed... Okay, less than 100. Okay, well, Fukushima has killed... Nobody died directly from the disaster. Oh, damn it! Okay, that first bit of the video was a joke, and I love the peace movement, but also we've got to talk seriously about nuclear energy. Because the fact is, pretty much everything the world thinks it knows about nuclear is wrong. Now, why am I bothering to tell you this? Okay, so my name's Joel. I'm an environmental activist. I mean, really, my biggest passion is nature, rewilding, but I'm deadly scared about the climate crisis. I've done everything I can. I've glued myself to things. I've been arrested for gluing myself to things. I've been taken to court for gluing myself to things. I've paid the price, and I still have glue at home. I might do it again. But the fact of the matter is, there is one thing that we really can't do without if we're going to solve the climate crisis, and that is this thing, nuclear energy. Now in this video, I'm going to give you 7 reasons why we need nuclear energy. And I'm going to finish with the one you want to know about the most, and that is how many people it's actually killed. Okay, so here is reason number 1, why nuclear energy is so important. It is 0 carbon. Now today we need a lot of energy, and we need renewable energy massively. But the brilliant thing about nuclear energy is it doesn't produce any carbon whatsoever. Now, you might have seen those cooling towers with stuff coming out the top of it. That's steam, because nuclear energy is actually essentially just steam power. Now, the way that nuclear creates its energy is that it takes a metal rod, essentially, out of uranium as the most common fuel, and it puts water around it in a reactor, which gets hot, that creates steam, it turns a turbine, and hey presto, you have a huge, huge amount of energy. And so following on from that, reason number 2 is that nuclear energy is amazingly reliable and very long lasting as well. Now with nuclear energy, what you can do is you can have a reliable form of baseload power. Essentially, with nuclear, you can have electricity all the time, as much of it as you want, essentially. But as well as that, if you want it to play another role and be what is called dispatchable power, which is where you can turn it on or turn it off to fill in supply demand, or fill in the gaps left when it's not windy or sunny and renewables stop working, well, nuclear energy can do that too. But this reliability doesn't just go on for a few years, it goes on for generations. Most nuclear power plants today could be lasting up to 80 years, or possibly even longer. So if we build a nuclear power plant today, our grandchildren, or maybe even great-grandchildren, could still be boiling the kettle at home from the energy it creates. Now, reason number 3 is one I'm very passionate about, and really it's the thing that brought me to nuclear energy in the first place, and that is that it's got a tiny, tiny land footprint. Now, all energy requires space. If you look at a field full of solar panels, you realize that actually it does take up some room. And this is one of the most amazing things about nuclear energy, is that it's incredibly energy dense. That basically means you can get a hell of a lot of power, a hell of a lot of electricity out of a very small power plant and a very small amount of material. Now, the numbers are quite mind-blowing actually when you put it to it. So in average, a solar power plant out of solar PV requires around 300 times more land than nuclear power. Wind, if you draw a circle around all of that area covered by wind turbines, can be around 500 times more land. And if you take biofuels, one of the most insane forms of energy, that's basically just burning plants to make electricity or make fuel, well, it's going on for thousands, possibly around 15,000 times more land that you would need than a nuclear power plant. And so today, if we do want to restore nature and rewild our landscapes, having nuclear energy in the mix is a fantastic way of freeing up space for that. Now, reason number 4 follows on from the tiny land footprint, and that is that nuclear has a very small amount of materials use. Now, because it's a very small power plant versus all of those, say, wind turbines and solar PV, actually the amount of stuff that we need to mine out of the ground and all the knock-on environmental effects you get from that mining is tiny. The biggest materials throughput use is from solar PV and from hydropower. Solar uses a lot of steel and glass and rare earth metals. Hydropower, well, building a dam, it uses an insane amount of concrete. But with nuclear, a very small amount of uranium can power an entire city. Now, one of the most crazy uses of nuclear energy is to power ships. There is an aircraft carrier in the US Navy that has been running now for 30 years, powering across the globe off a piece of uranium the size of a grapefruit. This is how efficient it is in its uses of materials. Now, following on from this is a more controversial one, and that's reason number 5, nuclear is cheap. Now, this is one of the things you'll hear thrown against nuclear all the time. It's expensive, we can't afford it, we can't do it. It's nonsense. Now, although there is an upfront cost to nuclear, and yes, it does require a lot of money to build your nuclear power plant in the first place, it ends up being an incredibly cheap form of power for 2 big reasons. One, it lasts a really, really long time, and so all of that upfront investment ends up paying off over generations. But secondly, you don't have to pay for backups or other things to fill the gaps, which is what you've got to do with renewable energy. Now look, we need a lot of wind and we need a lot of solar, but we have to be honest about what they also need. If you want wind and solar, you've got to plan for when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. And the current plan for that is to have batteries so that we can store that power, or interconnectors so that we can link up, say, some wind turbines in Germany with some people in Spain. And so if it's not windy in one place, it will hopefully be windy or sunny somewhere else, and it can balance out. But all of that comes with an extra cost. And so generally, for every $1 that we spend on a nuclear power plant, we've got to spend $3 on renewables to pay for those extra backups or those extra interconnectors as well. And now we get to the more controversial ones. 2 final things that people are constantly throwing against nuclear that they've got completely, insanely wrong. Reason number 6 is that nuclear waste is beautiful. It is the most wonderful form of energy waste. Now, to understand this, firstly, let's think about a car and where its waste streams go. Fossil fuels, i.e. when you put petrol or diesel in your car, put their waste streams straight out into our shared atmosphere. Out the exhaust they go, into our streets, full of our loved ones and children, and they directly cause suffering. The number of air pollution deaths caused per year at the moment is somewhere around 8 to 9 million people caused by fossil fuels. Now compare that to nuclear. When you take the uranium out of a reactor, you can safely store it, completely contain it. And today, whilst the image we've got of nuclear waste is barrels of green gloop hanging around being dumped in rivers, this is just The Simpsons. This is not reality, and we need reality right now. In reality, nuclear waste looks like this. You can hug it, you can stroke it, you can store it. But the reason it's truly beautiful is we shouldn't be using that word waste at all. It's actually spent fuel, which is a technical way of saying inside this stuff that we're calling waste, there is an unbelievable amount of energy still to use. Indeed, of your average nuclear waste, 96% of the energy has not been used. And this leads to a really awesome calculation. It's estimated that, to take the UK as an example, all of the nuclear waste it's got hanging around, all of the spent fuel, could be put back into more advanced forms of nuclear reactors, unlock the energy, and could unlock 500 years worth of the UK's entire electricity demand. 500 years could be unlocked from what we're calling waste. So this stuff is awesome. It needs to be used, and it could be powering our entire futures. And thank you so much for watching this far, because we finally got to the bit that everyone wants to know about. Is nuclear dangerous? Well, no, because reason number 7 why we need to include nuclear in our way of saving the climate is that nuclear energy is one of the safest energy sources ever discovered. In fact, it's so safe that it's killed, per unit of energy it creates, less people than wind turbines. Yes, it's madness, it's bonkers. But ultimately what this comes down to is the fact that nuclear energy has been mired in misinformation, and that misinformation is just as unreliable as anti-vaxxer information, or anti-5G, or any of these conspiracy theories around there. And this is why it's so good that you've watched the video to this point, and it's so good that hopefully you'll be able to go out there and address this misinformation, because misinformation costs lives. And in this circumstance, when it comes to the climate crisis, we can't afford that anymore. So let's take this nuclear energy, let's put away the misinformation, and let's solve the climate crisis.